Hello. That's the layout of the old city of Jerusalem. So the Muslim Quarter has a lot to talk about, and Muslim Quarter has more than just okay. Well, I assume that for some of my audience, Muslim religious sites might not be that relevant, but it's about culture, and it's also about how Muslim Quarter, being the biggest one, actually incorporated a lot of Christian sites, some Jewish sites too, and in general, that's the area that has uh, some of the amazing eateries. And I have some videos of those, and I will be filming more when I travel. Hopefully, I will. And well, I can't wait to just share all those experiences with you. And as you see, Temple Mount is marked in a different color, and it stands out. And we spoke a lot about the differences. So we spoke a lot about the special, I would say, situation around the Temple Mount. And yes, it is policed by the state of Israel, but all the entire Temple Mount is under control of WAQF, the organization that controls all the religious sites, Muslim religious sites. They're based in Jordan, and non-Muslims are not allowed to enter indoors in any of the buildings on the Temple Mount, and the entrance hours for non-Muslims are restricted. And there's only one way to do that. If you look at this map and you'll see the Jewish quarter, the Dung Gate. So if you go through the Dung Gate and you approach the checkpoint, from there you need to take this kind of a wooden bridge. That's the one I'm showing you here in this photo. And this bridge will take you directly to the Temple Mount. So non-Muslims only enter through this gate, and they only leave through another gate, which I will show you next weekend. Yeah, but even though we cannot enter Aqsa Mosque or Dome of the Rock, there are a lot of photographs, and it wasn't like this all the time. Up until 2000, access um, was open to everyone. But well, what can we do here? And this is the view overlooking the Western Wall, right? The Western Wall Plaza, and I believe this is one of the iconic views, of course, because here you kind of get to see the diversity of Jerusalem, and it being the just one Temple Mount being so incredibly important both for Jews, because Western Wall is the Jewish heritage site. It's the basically considered the big open air synagogue, but access there is open to anyone, no matter who you are, what you believe in. Anyone is welcome. You only need to pass through the security check, and that's it. But that's just the reality of our life. And also, this is the third most important site for Muslims all over the world. And obviously, a lot of stories of Jesus around Christianity, the formation of Christianity is absolutely inseparable from Jerusalem and just the entire Holy Land, of course, but mainly Jerusalem and the Temple Mount, of course. So, and with these tours, I'm trying to underline the importance of this site for all the three Abrahamic religions. So, yeah, we've spoken a lot about archaeology on the Temple Mount. I'm not going to repeat myself here. I will be getting back to a few things here and there, but the important thing is that it's absolutely undoubtedly that the Jewish temple had existed, both temples, and it's out of question. All the archaeologists of the international community, they are convinced that the temple was not in the city of David, which we spoke about last time, right? But exactly on the Temple Mount. There were also a lot of sources in the previous times that also claimed the same. I've provided a lot of them over the course of those 9 tours that we have done. And for example, there's one more, just one of many other sources. So in the seventh century, actually shortly before and during the time of the Muslim conquest of this land, uh, as you know, before that it was the Byzantine period, and Jerusalem was the center of Christianity, obviously. So at that time, the Patriarch of Jerusalem was Sophronius. And later on in the ninth century, there was published, a book. And in that book, there was a quote that referred to the Temple Mount, and that was attributed to Saint Sophronius. Later on, Sophronius was pronounced a saint. It is the rock. It is the center of the world, and was a temple for the Israelites who held it in great veneration. And wherever they were, they turned their faces toward it during the prayer. And it still works nowadays, even though, well, yeah, there's no temple anymore. But this is true. So wherever the Jews are, whenever they pray, they face uh, Israel. Whenever they are in Israel, they face Jerusalem. And in Jerusalem, their prayers are always directed towards the temple, well, where the temple used to be, the two temples. And I think this is going to be quite useful to kind of restore the chronology here. I'm going to be very quick about it, but also it will be handy since we have some also new viewers tonight. So we're going from up down. The first temple, around 980 BCE, Solomon built it. We have spoken about where exactly and how do we know for sure that it was not in the Siege of David, which is the oldest part of Jerusalem, by the way, right? Where David came and built the city. So father of Solomon, Solomon built it. Then 586 BCE, the Babylonian conquest razed Jerusalem, destroyed the temple, and a lot of Jews were taken to Babylonian exile, right? This is the song on the rivers of Babylon, right? That's the song about that. So later on, 50 years later, Jews are allowed to come back, and by around 515 BCE, Zerubbabel rebuilt the temple. It was way more modest than the original temple, when the Solomon's temple, but it was the temple. Later on, in the second century BCE, Hasmoneans, let's say it was the Hasmonean period when a certain family, um, aristocratic family, managed to defeat the Greeks and the Hellenistic culture. And they also, by taking over the Temple Mount, they extended the Temple Mount. You can see that in this graph. And thank you so much, Lynn Rittmeyer, for providing this. As you know, I rely largely on Lynn Rittmeyer's visual aids and his book about the archaeology of Jerusalem. And later on, in the first century BCE, Herod the Great extended the Temple Mount and also rebuilt Zerubbabel's temple. It was just something absolutely out of this world and way bigger. It was the Temple Mount got almost twice as big. The temple itself got three times as big. And then 637, this was the Muslim conquest of Jerusalem. Shortly before that, in 609, Islam was born as a religion. We're talking about common era. And further on, the Temple Mount, as well as the area around it, would be totally rebuilt, and there would be also royal palaces built around it. So the buildings you can see there in the corner in the lower drawing, Muslim buildings, you see the chain of these rectangular buildings around the Temple Mount. And what we're looking at, so basically this is the corner of Western and Southern Wall. I think this will put us in the right context, because that's actually the area we're going to be exploring tonight. Well, but first and foremost, a little bit of the Haram al-Sharif, which is the Temple Mount, and the Dome of the Rock. So we have spoken multiple times about the importance of the Dome of the Rock, and this is the Shrine of the Rock, and this is where the piece of the bedrock of the Moriah, of Mount Moriah, uh, actually juts out, and you can actually see that with certain marks there, which clearly were chisel marks, not just weathering. Something had been standing there, and many believe that those was exactly the Ark of the Covenant, right, where the Holy of the Holies in the Jewish temple used to be. Well, but that's before the destruction, obviously. And the Temple Mount platform, we know it had been rebuilt, and it stands on top of the Solomon period platform, and we were able to identify. Well, I was able to explain to you. So archaeologists, historians have been able to identify the location, the exact size of the Solomon period platform, and all the other extensions, because stones can't speak. You cannot date stones. Carbon 14 doesn't do that, but stones can speak if you know what to look at. And since we identified the Dome of the Rock as the place of the Holy of the Holies, well, the Mount Moriah, the bedrock, right? Since we identified that as the place of the Holy of the Holies, so for Jesus, we're talking here already in Christian narrative, but Jesus was a Jew, right? Jesus was not a Christian, so Jesus was a Jew, and he is the one who further, well, thanks to whom and after whom Christianity would start as a religion. But at that point, he was the Jew who had different views on many things, who did not agree with the practices and a lot of corruption that was going on in Jerusalem with regards to the pilgrimage and the temple tax and many other things. And since this is the place, so let's talk about the importance of what kind of things, what kind of events happened in the life of Jesus around the Temple Mount. Well, around the Dome of the Rock, first and foremost. So we can start with the very beginning. So I'm just referring to Luke here, but there are so many other sources, but we're just talking about some of the Gospels here. So Mary Joseph brought the infant Jesus to the temple to present him to God, right? Then there he was recognized by Simon, and then Anna the prophetess, who spoke of him to others. So that was the very first time. So that in Jesus, well, some historians did a lot of counting. I'm not sure what's going on here. Wait a second. So many archaeologists and historians, they try to count how many times Jesus could have visited the Temple Mount, and they claim hundreds of times, because every year there were three festivals that were an absolute must, to be, well, to visit Jerusalem and the temple. Then boy Jesus teaching in the temple, right? So teaching in the temple. He was just a boy that started before he started preaching. That was before he started his miracles and his ministry. At the age of 12, Jesus remained in Jerusalem after Passover and found, sitting among the teachers, listening and asking questions, astonishing them with his understanding, right? So the very important experiences, right? The very important formative years also were spent in Jerusalem and in the courts of the temple. And we spoke about the courts already in the previous tour. We spoke about where the courts were, where different visitors, depending on their sex, depending on their religion, could be on the Temple Mount. We spoke of different areas designated for various activities on the Temple Mount. So the cleansing of the temple in the Gospels, you can see that in the four Gospels, sorry. So Jesus drives out money changers and merchants, declaring, "My Father's house shall be called a house of prayer." So we we read about it that Jesus, when he came to Jerusalem, well, first everyone had to purify themselves in the special purification baths called mikvaot in plural, and also you had to pay a tax. And money changers. So Jews were coming from all over the world, all over diaspora, and they had their currencies, but they had to exchange it to the special shekel, to the special coin that was the temple tax. And the currency rate was absolute rip-off. So corruption. What can we do? Jesus was not happy about it, and you know that he also turned the tables of the money changers because he saw how the situation worsened. Then, after the resurrection and the Pentecost, so we spoke about it, the apostles continued praying and teaching near the temple, and then Peter heals the lame man at the beautiful gate. And a beautiful gate, so we spoke about it. We believe that the beautiful gate was actually the one of the central gates to enter the temple. And archaeologists have been able to identify those places and even some stones. There you go. So just a little bit of the reminder. So there was even a court of Gentiles. So the Temple Mount wasn't exclusively a Jewish site. And in Jerusalem, as we know, not only Jews lived at that time originally, well, the Jebusites and also smaller, different other peoples lived in Jerusalem. Even when Israelites came 3,000 years ago to the city of David, there had been living several groups of Canaanite peoples. And later on, Jerusalem further on remained not exclusively a Jewish city. And well, now we're looking at the model of the Herodian period. So during the Herodian times, there were a lot of Romans. There was no Roman legion at that point, but there were obviously Romans also in the city, and Romans were allowed to enter. There were two courts that they could enter, but later on, starting from the already beautiful gate where the outer court is, so that was only the area for the Jews, and then only for the priests. And then the temple, the Hall of the Holies, that was what we spoke about. That was a very different area. And speaking of, by the way, any archaeology, as I said, there were found stones, and that's the stones I'm talking about. There have been found two stone tablets, where in Latin, they were they were written. So these tablets were found in different areas, but those were worn in inscriptions. Well, I'm just going to quote it here. So the two wooden inscriptions found north of the historical Temple Mount forbidding Gentiles to enter the inner court of the temple. These could not possibly have migrated uphill from the city of David, right? So again, these type of stones had to be just around the area where the court of Gentiles was, and then warning the Gentiles, so non-Jews, against entering the inner court. So going through the beautiful gate was prohibited for non-Jews. That's basically it. And well, sorry, did I say Latin? Greek, obviously, because even though it was the Roman period, in general, it is referred to as the Hellenistic period anyway, because Romans were still representatives of the Hellenistic culture anyway. And a lot of inscriptions that date to the Roman period would be in Greek. That's very common. So these stones, I would say, also testify to the idea of first of all, the existence of the temple. Again, as I said, this is not really, it's not questionable. And also testify to the location of the temple on the Temple Mount. Why would they have been carried up the hill had the temple been in the territory of the city of David. And for those of you who didn't watch the previous episode, this is the model from the Davidson Center. It's an archaeological park of the corner of the western and the southern walls of the Temple Mount, outside of the Temple Mount. And if you look at this model of the Temple Mount, and then you go down like 6 o'clock, so basically that's the direction where the city of David was. And there's a big archaeological site there. There were gazillion of findings made testifying that uh, to the fact of the existence of the city of David. So yeah, once again, Temple Mount, right? As I said, originally it was just a mountain, right? Mount Moriah, and that is the mountain where the binding of Isaac took place. And starting from that point where God revealed himself, and where, well, that's very important covenant was fulfilled. So since then, this has been the sacred place for Jews and then for Christians, obviously. And also, as we know, this is an important holy site for Muslims because according to not Quran, but additions to Quran, this was the place of Muhammad's night journey. We spoke about it, and I will be mentioning it briefly also next time. But now we need to move on, and this is where we are now in reality. So this is the corner of the western and southern wall. West to the left, and south goes straight. This is the corner of the western wall. Behind that wall over there is the Western Wall Plaza, and you can even see bits of the wooden structure that takes you to the Temple Mount. And this, as I told you last time, this used to be the road along the Temple Mount from the outside. This was the road filled with shops, the money changers and different shops that were exactly to the right. You see the stone structure, big rectangular stones. Those were the stores. Those were the stores where this is where the money changers were. This is where you could buy a pigeon, for sacrifice, and also some other shops. And this was the main road, and Jesus walked it millions of times. Well, a lot of times. And you see all the level of this, all the destruction there, what's going on with the floor. Well, that's we know already. This is the destruction came from the stones that were falling down from the top of the Temple Mount in year 70 AD, when the Romans under Titus and Vespasian burned the temple. We spoke about this stone. This is the stone that was exactly at the corner on the very, very top. This is an amazing finding that was made, and it's written there, to the trumpeting place. Like, it may not make a lot of sense, but, well, you can't really date the stones itself because it's not organic material, but, well, there is something interesting here because the Mishnah, the collection of like Jewish practices and Jewish lifestyle, clearly explains that in the very corner of the Temple Mount, there was a person standing with a trumpet, and he was announcing Shabbat because people didn't have watches. People didn't, well, they didn't know what time the sun was about to go down, and many people will be working in the fields, so it took them also some time to finish the job and come home before the Shabbat. So there would be several signals made by the trumpeters, and this trumpeting stone was found exactly where it was supposed to be, at the corner, right? Again, why would there be a trumpeting stone if there hadn't been any temple, right? Well, yeah, so you kind of have the idea. It was exactly at where it was found, but it all used to be under the rubble. right? All that came to the surface only after 1967, when the Jordanian occupation of Jerusalem was put to an end, and well, it was possible to carry out excavations and archaeological research, and there was immense layer of rubble discovered. And when they cleaned it, so they cleaned it to the times of Jesus, so like 2,000 years ago. What we were looking at there above, there were some stones jutting out, right, just over here. You see the stones, interesting structure. In the 19th century, Edward Robinson, who was one of the respected researchers of the Holy Land, and he was one of the first archaeologists as well. Obviously, uh, he only made an assumption because, well, it's 1863. The Holy Land had just a few years before that opened its doors, so to speak, to the pilgrims, because before that, the Ottomans did not invest and did not allow mass pilgrimage to the Holy Land. And then things changed after the Crimean War. I've spoken about it many times, so I'm not going to repeat myself. But we're also going to have the Q&A in the end, and I'll be more than happy to answer the questions that you might have. So Robinson just made an assumption that those stones, and basically those were the stones, those stones were on the same level. No, that was the ground level before. Just believe it or not, that was the ground level, and almost the ground level. So it was maybe a couple meters from the ground level. And Robinson made an assumption that that was an archway, because the stones looked suggestive of an archway. And only a century later, well, after these excavations became possible, that's exactly this was proved, and this is the rendering of what it might have looked like. So once again, you see the western wall exposed today's section. So this is just what we see nowadays. There is still so much more underground, believe it or not, still so much more to explore. And there is a big archaeological center, well, the Western Wall Tunnels, it's called, and there's so much archaeology exposed, so many stones exposed. We did a tour. We did tours there, a lot of tours. Well, it's just impossible to describe in 2 words. So the arch looked this way. We call it Robinson Arch, but it wasn't called this way back then, obviously. And that was kind of the VIP entrance to the Temple Mount. Um, and it seems to have had actually 3 entry points. And it was very clever of Herod, because he knew that millions of Jews would be coming at least 3 times a year to Jerusalem, and he needed to make sure there would be well, enough space, and that there would be enough entry points and exit points for the for the visitors. So that made a lot of sense, that there would be VIP entrances, like a fast pass, and also there were a lot more ordinary, so to speak, entrances. Well, and in that area, in the Davidson Center, it's now it's named after another archaeologist, Davidson Center. Well, it's named after a patron, so to speak, who, with his donations, in provided ample opportunities for archaeological excavations and explorations and research. So there was found, for example, a golden bell. It was discovered in the drainage channel under the pavement near the Temple Mount, so in Davidson Center. And these type of pendant, we know from Mishnah, from the descriptions, that the priests in the temple wore garments or well, that had the tassels and also had these pendants on their garments, on their vestments, and it was found. Also, they found special tokens for ritual purity. So we spoke about it, that there had to be, well, spiritual purification carried out, right, before visiting the temple, and there was this type of a token given. It says pure for Yahweh, pure for God. So this was kind of a confirmation of their visit to the to the mikveh, to the purification bath. A menorah etching was also found under that pavement. And well, a menorah, well, I think this symbol is undoubtedly Jewish. So it was found under the pavement. So it was it was found even under the Roman layer. So it was even before that. And it was also found on the territory of Antonia Fortress. We spoke about it before, and we'll be talking about it also shortly. That's also interesting. So let's have a look at this. This is now the outline of the modern Temple Mount, right, from the Herodian period, and that's how it looks today. Also, remember we talked about the Muslim period and we talked about the different buildings that were constructed on the mount and around the mount during the Muslim period. So here we actually have kind of mm, what it looked like in the 8th century. Uh, Well, it's only a rendering, but you kind of have an idea. So you see the Temple Mount, right? You see the Dome of the Rock, you see the Aqsa Mosque, you see the corner, right, of the western and the southern walls of the Temple Mount. You can identify the Robinson's Arch already, right? The area where the Wilson's Arch is, and between the Wilson's Arch and the Barclay Gate, this uh, well, is where the current Western Wall Plaza is, but all those houses in that area is now underground. And a lot of the stones, a lot of the parts of the walls of the buildings have been excavated. They have been discovered, but they are all in this underground museum called the Western Wall Tunnels. And also behind the Wilson's Arch, this is also part of the exposition of the Western Wall Tunnels Museum. It's an amazing place to visit, an amazing place to visit. And here we are in that very area, the corner. Mark, thank you so much for the tips. Thank you. So what we're looking at, where we are walking now, is the corner of the southern wall of the Temple Mount. And I need to explain you one thing here. Let me go quickly back to that rendering, right? It's important to always keep in mind that it's not like when Muslims came, they completely razed to the ground everything. They would be building on top. Yeah, okay, there was destruction, but there wasn't destruction underground as well. No, it would be just building on top of what they saw. And what archaeology does, it takes layers and layers and layers and layers. Obviously, uh, Muslims came during the Byzantine period and they put an end to a Byzantine period. So, but when they came, there had been life all around the Temple Mount. As we spoke about it before, we are not entirely sure what was going on during the Byzantine period on the Temple Mount itself. It must have been, well, according to most scholars, it must have been in a very, I would say, abandoned state, since it wasn't a place of the Jewish prayer, and the Jews were really restricted from, in general, and I would say oppressed during the Byzantine period. So we don't know what was going on really on the Temple Mount, but around the Temple Mount, it was the Byzantine period Jerusalem, big thriving city, and Byzantine and Muslims built on top of it. So now let's go back to the video. And I would like to share with you a video. You can find it on the YouTube channel. It's the official YouTube channel of the Israel Antiquities Authorities. So about a couple of months ago, there was made a very interesting discovery, and it was made in this area. So this area, this is where Muslim palaces used to be. but they were all under the ground, right? So it was, and also largely destroyed by time. And when archaeologists removed those palaces, the layer of the palaces, they went to the Byzantine layer, right? It's layer upon layer. Jerusalem is a very, very big filo pastry. What can I say? And so exactly in 2025 and still in 2026, there have been carried out a lot of extensive archaeological excavations. And instead of 1,000 words, I'm going to save you time. And I've just screen recorded that 1.5 minute video of the discovery made. And you can also get to see the footage, the area that is not available, that is not accessible to tourists yet because the excavations are ongoing. So let's watch that. The only thing is I need to make sure that we'll have the sound. So I will just rejoin again because sometimes it doesn't work the way I want it to work. And I'll just rather make sure everything is working nicely and rejoin with that. Okay, very good. So there we go.
Time period which brings huge change to Jerusalem. And apparently, after approximately 500 years, the Jews are finally allowed to return to Jerusalem. Just behind me, our colleagues excavated a house called the House of Menorot because 3 menorahs were depicted on the walls of the house, and then they claimed that those Jews that returned to Jerusalem in the 7th century CE actually settled right here under the southwest corner of the Temple Mount. There was not much more evidence for it until just recently, when we finally uncovered several more houses in the same area, including a pendant made out of lead which depict a menorah on both sides. And I do believe that this discovery actually proves this long-held theory that those Jews that returned to Jerusalem in the 7th century CE actually settled right in this area.
So I guess it's now more or less clear what's going on there, what was going on there. So during the Byzantine period, Jews were banned from entering Jerusalem at all. And with the arrival of Muslims, it became possible. And in that 7th century, we believe that the Jewish quarter, so to speak, was in the corner and also in the western part that goes parallel to the Temple Mount, because the southern part was all about, well, it would be all about the Umayyad palaces, the Muslim palaces further on, would be built further on. So this is a very interesting discovery, and it became public shortly before Hanukkah last year, so in 2025. And that was very symbolic because, well, menorah, well, Hanukkah menorah with 9 candles, but it doesn't matter. It's the symbol of Hanukkah. So I think it was just a very good Hanukkah gift to the Jews and everyone interested in archaeology and history. Okay, give me a second. Yeah. So where are we now? So this is this. Now we are totally on the in the southern wall of the Temple Mount, outside of the Temple Mount, right? And here we have a very interesting archaeological site. I did a tour about that area, like a detailed tour about that area several times before. At this moment, we're going to focus only on some things with regards to the Temple Mount and the Temple Mount archaeology. But basically, this was the area where pilgrims, hundreds and thousands of pilgrims, entered the Temple Mount. They walked those steps. And how do we know that? Well, because even if you cannot date the stones, what is between the stones can be dated. And also the stones themselves, they can speak. And also we have some other interesting sources of information. Let's have a look at here. So we see an interesting bit, kind of a part of an arch that goes nowhere. And the stones are very different, right? The stones around it and stones under the arch, so to speak, they're different, which means this was actually sealed at some point, right? And where this archway led to the Temple Mount, there was found a lattice um, in that archway, and that was yeah, I think a very notorious symbol, right? The swastika. But as we know, swastika is not the symbol that was designed by the Nazis, so it's an ancient symbol. And swastika is found in Israel in multiple sites. I mean, archaeological sites. But yes, as you probably know, there were times when Nazi swastika also hung in Jerusalem and in other areas called German colonies, but that's different tour of mine. So we're not going into that. And where does it take you? It takes you to the Temple Mount. Okay, but how do we know exactly what was there? Maybe it was just a window. Maybe it was built, and maybe that archway was built it wasn't even an archway, but a kind of a window built by Muslims. Yeah, yeah. Well, it could have been so, but in 1930s, there were I've spoken about it in detail before, so I'm going to go briefly on that. Robert Hamilton was he was present on the site. So there was in 1927 there was a massive earthquake in Jerusalem, and the Al-Aqsa was damaged. And it was decided to not just to repair the roof that collapsed, but also fortify, well, just improve the conditions of the columns on of Aqsa Mosque. And this is when um, floors were also taken out, and well, the floors were uh, opened up, and a lot of interesting things came up. First of all, a lot of wooden details. Definitely, well, these are the cedar woods. A lot of these pieces of, well, a lot of these wooden blocks were dated, and they dated to around the first or second century BCE, and those were cedar wood coming from Lebanon, just like Herod did, because Herod did just like it was done by Solomon, who also brought cedars from Lebanon, and it dated exactly the same period, so first century BCE, right? So they were found these bulks, obviously in the secondary use, but they had been just there on the Temple Mount, so why not using them? So that really makes sense to me, absolutely. The secondary use is something that really confuses many. And David Robertson found an archway totally sealed, totally underground under the floors of Al-Aqsa Mosque. He found this corridor and he took photos. And this report is you can find it in open access. And he took photographs. This is under Al-Aqsa Mosque, the big subterranean passageways that led exactly to that gate. And that's how we know it's a double gate. And in Mishnah, it is written that there was a southern wall and there was the Kulda gate complex, right? Of the triple gate for entrance and the double gate for exit. And the architecture is clearly Roman, which clearly takes you back to the Herodian period, first century BCE. That's what Al-Aqsa Mosque looked like after the earthquake. So there was a lot of work that had to be done, a lot of work, that's for sure. So this is the photos from 1927, 1928. So the roof basically collapsed, and this is how those woods were surfaced. Well, they were discovered, and this is when carbon-14 dating analysis was carried out, right? So, yeah, this is the photo from the outside. That was a very sad view. Incredible, right? Just to think of it. So, yeah, so now we know, and I have been able to kind of prove it, that this is not just a window, that was a gateway. That was the exit from the Temple Mount. A lot of these stones also date to the same period. Again, not the stones were dated, but the contents in between the stones were dated. And okay, but where is the triple gate? So the double gate is just to the left from us, right behind our back, and we're moving towards the triple gate complex. That's Aqsa Mosque constructions already, right on the up, and if we go all the way to the corner of the southern and eastern wall, so you may remember that area as the another subterranean mosque. But this is the triple gate. Altogether, five gates are called the Holder complex. It's a bit of a question why it's called this way. Most probably it's named after a prophetess, not the rodent. that's that's what you call in Hebrew a rodent. Well, probably not. This kind of a still a question, but this is the name coming mentioned in Mishnah. And when I was well, this area also that goes downstairs. There's there has been carried out a lot of excavations over the course of many years, and this area is called Ofen. So the area is filled with those purification baths. They have been discovered in dozens and dozens, which only testifies to the idea that that's the amount of olives, by the way. And the idea is simple. So before the temple, every Jew had to purify themselves. And since for pilgrimage festivals, there came hundreds of thousands of Jews. Well, they had to have enough space, have to have enough mikvaot to purify themselves. So that's why there was like a mikveh town over there. And there's one more thing. I promised to speak about Antonia Fortress. So we know where it was from the north. It's the northwestern corner of the Temple Mount. Antonia Fortress is identified by many as the place of Praetorium, where judgment of Jesus took place as well. Many claim that Antonia Fortress was the place where Roman legion was based. But Roman legion wasn't based in Jerusalem up until its destruction. So there was Roman presence, but there was just probably hundreds, maybe 1,000 of guards that guarded Jerusalem, that guarded the Temple Mount, obviously, especially during the pilgrimage festivals, but it was not the base for the Roman legion. So the Roman legion would come much later after the temple was destroyed, and also after the Jerusalem itself would be razed to the ground in 135 by Emperor Hadrian. And this is when Jerusalem was turned into a pagan city. So there was again layer on top of layer on top of layer, destruction, and then construction, destruction, construction, destruction, construction. Nice beat, right? So yeah, and this is the photo from one of the tours that I did. So this is exactly the wall of the Temple Mount from the north, and in that wall we see that square in the center of the frame, right? And there were found a lot of these cavities. So these square holes are believed to have been the supporting beams for the portico of the Herodian temple structure. So, and the Antonia Fortress was basically the kind of the residence for Roman emperors and Roman officials coming to Jerusalem. It was built by Herod and named after Mark Antony, that was in charge of the Roman Empire at that time. In the book of Josephus Flavius, who was a Roman historian in the first century Common Era, so what we read now, Titus gave orders to his soldiers that were with him to dig up the foundations of the Tower of Antonia and make him a ready passage for an army to come up. So remember, I told you that it was the easiest to always invade the Temple Mount and the old city of Jerusalem from the north, because from the north, the terrain is a lot more even, and then it goes down the hill. So it was just easier to access the Temple Mount from the north because the walls were not that high, not that tall, sorry. And why would Titus That's we're talking about year 70 when the temple would be destroyed. So Titus, why would Titus destroy the base of their army legion? That makes no sense. So it's also out of question that Antonia Fortress was just the base for the legion. It makes no sense at all. Again, thank you, Lynn Whitmire, for providing this visual works. Yeah, I just promised to get back to this for a second. And now, so often, well, this area, it's there's a lot, really, a lot going on, and also the excavations were carried out at different times, and they kind of present different periods. But this area, Ophel, is filled with all these mikvaot, these purification baths. This is one of those. I'm not going into detail about what kind of, what were the specificities of those mikvaot, but there were obviously a lot of conditions for them to be right mikvaot. The area Ophel that we're talking about, look to basically to the right hand side, right? That area between the wall and the road. This is all called Ophel up until the separation in the middle, right? You see that separation. That's the territory of the Muslim period palaces called Umayyad palaces. It's just one of the dynasties that ruled the first Muslim period. So this is an immense area, and it is filled with dozens and dozens of purification baths, and not all was discovered. Not there's still a lot of areas that are only dated to the Byzantine period. They just haven't dug lower to the earlier period. So in the book of Acts, we read, those who accepted the message were baptized, and about 3,000 were added to the number that day. Remember, we spoke about it, right? The Pentecost, 3,000 people. Where could that happen, right? So the Pentecost, 3,000. There was no really enough space for that in the old city. The only place where 3,000 people could be attending the the service, so to speak, and then well, it was the Temple Mount. And imagine for 3,000 people to enter the Temple Mount, they all had to purify themselves somewhere. Hence the number of purification baths. So when I spoke that the place of Pentecost is most possibly the royal stoa, right? Exactly on the southern wall, on the south of the southern part of the Temple Mount. So we have spoken about it. And Ophel is believed to have been that area with mikvaot, with money changers as well, and possibly the stores where you could buy the animals for sacrifice. Yeah, we're going to be overrunning, but just a little bit because I would like to wrap up with that to start the next tour of the Temple Mount with Muslim heritage sites. Um, I lost count to actually how many mikvaot there were found. And this is, well, okay, it's a little bit outdated, but it's kind of for you to have an idea what's going on in the Ophel excavation. So there are different areas, and they have been excavated unevenly. So some of them have been excavated to a level of Byzantine period, some to a later period, some to even earlier period. So, and the excavations have been going on. They have been ongoing and they're still going on. But some of the interesting discoveries made, Dolores, thank you so much for your tips as well. Just a couple of findings that also testify to the idea of the importance of the Temple Mount, right? There was found a bulla or the seal, right, to seal the documents of Hezekiah. And we know that Hezekiah was a very important 7th century BCE king, right? So we know that from a lot of sources, and that was his symbol, this kind of a bug. That was his symbol. And well, this is just how Hezekiah was portrayed in the 17th century. Obviously, he didn't look like that, but it's kind of for you to have an idea. Then there was found another seal that is possibly belonged to Prophet Isaiah. Okay, 2,800 a year old seal. Probably Isaiah, because some words are missing, so it's really hard to say whether it was the prophet Isaiah or just any other Isaiah. But nevertheless, it's quite plausible, and that's also a very interesting find. And again, to everyone thinking that the Old Testament is just a religious literature of absolute fiction, well, that understanding, that concept doesn't really hold water, because there have been so extra biblical proof found testifying to what's written in the Holy Scripture that it's kind of um, just would be too uh, foolish to ignore. Let me put it like this. And also an interesting thing over here. So there was a Armstrong Institute of Biblical Archaeology is mainly focusing on the area of Ophel, mainly, and they have carried out a lot of excavations in that area, and they are now in charge of the current excavations. So there was a place that was discovered up to the Byzantine period. So we are talking here 7th century. Okay, from the 4th to the 7th century Common Era. That's the Byzantine period in the Holy Land history. And then, again, obviously, after everything is photographed, described, if you need to go lower to earlier years, you need to dismantle it. So it was dismantled carefully, taken to storage, and then they started digging more. And this is how they managed to discover what was there. And they discovered a gatehouse area. It was spring 2025, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, it was spring. And then in April, the photos were taken. So they cleared it out and they discovered what they believe. They're convinced those are the gates. I like this photo very much. So I took it from Armstrong website, obviously, the Armstrong Institute. So red, it was the Byzantine period. And then when they dug up, they saw the First Temple period archaeology, and they discovered a gate. So they were able to date it again, thanks to the contents between the stones and also the ground level. And they are convinced this is the gate. And this is a gate that also looked, there were several other archaeological sites where which were dated the First Temple period around 1000 BCE, 2000 BCE, and the gates look absolutely identical. Obviously, archaeology would differ with periods, but that type of archaeology, that type of structure of gates, it's very suggested that it was the First Temple period as well, and the Solomon period architecture. So the chambers, the way the gate looked, and so they believe that there is still so much more archaeology underground and in the vicinity, because it looks like that area also looked, okay, this is quite mind-boggling, like this. How, because we know that when Solomon built the temple, he kind of connected the Jebusite and the Davidic period of the city of David, and connected it, surrounded it with the walls, then built the temple uphill. And it looks like Ophel actually looked like that during times of Solomon, with the gate, with the passageway for pilgrims as well from the outside, and those gates seem to have been the entry point for everyone coming from outside of Jerusalem to the city and to the temple. Yep. Okay. Okay. Let's have the Q&A. The chat is on. Wow. So, as I said, next time, the next tour of Jerusalem will be about the architecture and the important Muslim heritage sites on the Temple Mount. There's interesting archaeology, interesting architecture, a little bit of archaeology, but still quite interesting. And we'll be talking about the area in the Muslim Quarter outside of the Temple Mount as well. And this is how I'm actually launching my Muslim Quarter series. So let me share with you the links. In the meantime, feel free to send in your questions. Let me share with you the complete schedule for the upcoming weekend. As I said, I might be traveling, so well, that because of that, I kind of rearranged my schedule a little bit, but the Jerusalem tour should happen the same time, exactly in a week from now. Let me see the questions. Actually, thank you so much, Lena. Thank you for joining and thank you for your interest in my tours. And also thank you everyone who have sent me your tips already. Thank you so much. Thank you, Cindy. Thank you so much for being here for me. I think I missed something else. Yeah, I know we have overrun also. I'm a notorious overrunner. I tend not to, but sometimes I just cannot stop halfway through. And since this is the final episode of my 10-part uh, virtual tour series, like 10 hours of just the Temple Mount archaeology, and well, this is yeah, I had to take it to the end. Thank you so much, Marcy. Thank you. So this has been it. So next episode, same time, Muslim heritage sites. But again, as I said, Muslim Quarter and the Temple Mount, it has so much heritage for everyone, regardless of your religion. Even if you're not religious at all, it's not about that. It's about the heritage, it's about the history, and it's about some very fundamental things as well. And yeah, so the core the reason for many things happening nowadays is also actually there on the Temple Mount as well in its history. And this is, um, well, the better we learn history, the better we know history, definitely. Uh, Sorry, Cindy, do you want me to send you the links for the sponsors link? Sorry. Yeah, I will just copy it again. Yeah, so the sponsors link, yeah, this is something quite interesting. Thank you so much for pointing it out, Cindy. Yeah, there is an option. Well, I've been referring to so many tours, not only of the Temple Mount, but many other tours from my earlier years and tours. So there are about 900 videos now. Not all of them are about Israel, but I would say about half of them are. And yes, thank you so much, Cindy. So this is there is an option to access all those videos on the YouTube playlist. Well, and this is a sponsorship option, which is an extra monthly payment. I mean, it's different. It's not the tips. It's kind of an extra payment, and you get this access 24/7. Plus, once in a couple of months, I arrange some sort of a Zoom talk, and I'm hoping to do that in January and I share a lot of content. Also there is a Q&A session and I answer also personal questions and share, well, different things from my life and also from my work. Yeah, there is a way to catch up on all those tours because I hardly ever repeat them the way they were done. I sometimes refer to them, sometimes I include different, well, parts and episodes from my tours, or I just use the footage but talk about other things. And yeah, so I think I'm a content power machine. In a way, I'm a content generator, and my Google Drive is almost has been used up, and they're like 5 terabytes, and I'm gonna need to buy more more terabytes. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining me. Thank you for your interest in my tours. Thank you for your questions. Thank you for joining me. And I'm hoping to see you on my other tours as well. And hopefully, I will be in Israel next week. Thank you, Devi. Thank you so much. And I hope the weather won't get in the way and I will be able to do live streams from Jerusalem, from Tel Aviv, and maybe even some other sites. I will be doing a lot of filming for more tours, and there's a lot more to come, I promise. So I'm not taking it lightly. Well, I'm very serious. I have a well-planned agenda to work, to film, to do also other work and provide all these stories to you. Thank you, Judith. Thank you, everyone. Thanks, Debbie. Thank you. So this has been recorded and it will be in open access for 1 week for sure. And the previous tour is still there. I'm going to close access tomorrow to those recordings. Thank you so much and bye bye. I'll see you next weekend. Thanks for everything.